Thank you for joining us. We'll begin shortly. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar presented by IFTA Select Sponsor Pepper, how independent distributors are dominating their markets with e-commerce and AI. My name is Matthew Sharing, and I'm responsible for business development here at IFTA. Happy to serve as facilitator for today's webinar. Before we get started, there are some quick housekeeping notes. All attendees are muted. If you have questions, please enter them into the questions box on your screen. We will hold all questions until the end, but feel free to type in your questions at any time. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the IFTA website in the coming days. And now I would like to introduce today's presenters. Bowie Cheung, co-founder and CEO at Pepper. From management consultant to co-founder and CEO at Pepper, Bowie's career has centered on scaling technology that has had dramatic influence on the food away from home experience we all know. By collaborating with a team of like-minded engineers and a bench of tech-forward food service veterans, Bowie is shaping Pepper into the largest e-commerce enabler for independent distribution around the world. Pepper's brings e-commerce to life for hundreds of independent distributors that represent more than $20 billion in gross market value and more than 25,000 operators actively engaging with the Pepper app. Next, we have Jason Gunn, head of marketing at Pepper. A chef at heart and with more than 20 years of experience in the food service industry, Jason has served in a variety of roles from leading restaurant operations to distributor sales rep, then promoted to corporate leadership positions for several national distributors to support e-commerce, category management, and supply chain initiatives. Jason was a co-founder at Attribytes, later acquired by Syndigo, and is now leading marketing at Pepper. With that, I'll hand it over to Bowie and Jason for today's presentation.
Thanks, Matt, for having us. Appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can hear us okay. Bowie, how you doing over there, buddy?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Can we unpack your history a little bit? Matt did a great job kind of introducing it, but I was just looking at your LinkedIn and it seems like after a stint as a management consultant, you got into Uber and later in a leadership position with Uber Eats. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? It's pretty impressive background.
Okay, yeah, sure. Happy to spend a couple of minutes on it. And so, I mean, like a lot of folks, I was in and out of food service jobs as a kid and growing up, but I had an opportunity to dive back into the world of food, and in this case, in the world of food and technology in early 2015, when Uber was exploring what are the different ways that we could leverage a fast-growing ride-sharing network. And it was an amazing experience being part of the early days, figuring out the role that delivery could play in food service. And so being the early general manager for that Uber Eats program, it's also where I met a lot of the other early folks that would become early team members at Pepper, were some of that early Uber Eats team. And it was amazing just to see that the change in culture over the years, the change in attitudes around technology in the restaurants. And one of the things that's been really exciting for me is to think about all the change that's happened in the restaurant space over the course of several years in attitudes around technology, and also what might be possible when modern technologies are applied more thoroughly in the food service landscape, more broadly, beyond just the retail layer, but also in distribution and in the supply chain. So a lot of the early inspiration that led to Pepper came, for me personally, came from some of those early experiences.
It's amazing because if you would have asked me when I went to culinary school way back in 2004 and said, what do you want to do? I don't think data e-commerce guy was necessarily even in my brain, but you know, that was just the funny walk that I took. And what I love about being at Pepper now is it really brings my career full circle, because I was there, you know, in the early days of .com with US Foods, for example, and that was designed to be kind of a sterile experience for national accounts. The temperament and the belief around letting customers take their own orders was more so that I didn't have to have a sales rep who I'm paying a lot of money to what is generally low margin business, and they've got static order guides, so just let them do it, right? Jason, I want you to go and sell, and I want you to take those orders and manage the pricing and stuff. And it's just really fun to see this kind of flip right now. I think the data is showing like 70% of restaurants are going to be ordering through some sort of e-commerce experience. Is that right?
Yeah, I think 70% is the latest reported set of statistics that we've seen from Cisco and US Foods and some of the national distributors that have been doing this for some time. And what we've tracked and been a part of over the last 4 years is what's the rate of adoption in independent distribution. And what's been amazing to see is a lot of independent distributors kind of following those footsteps and reaching similar levels of e-commerce adoption in their business, and seeing those same benefits that if you were a Cisco or US Foods in 2018 and 2019, you were reporting out to the street. And so that's been pretty cool to observe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think my career has been spent helping people understand that e-commerce is a thing. And, you know, in my experience with, you know, early versions of Syndigo, FSENet, and then Attribytes, which also became part of that, was getting distributors prepared for an e-commerce experience. And I think largely we've adopted that, right? I don't think you and I are going to sell anybody on the idea of having an e-com experience. That's table stakes. But what I think is interesting and what you have as a unique point of view is what's next, right? We're hearing a lot about AI and we're hearing a lot about digital experiences. And I think a lot of folks are really looking for guidance on what we need to do. And coming into this conversation, you and I were kind of picking apart this idea of what's really influencing that curve of adoption of something like AI, and getting people to adopt e-commerce is going to demand that we leverage AI in big ways. What are some cool things that are available to us now, bringing those things together with the widely available AI tools that we see?
You know, it's as we've been talking about this topic, one of the themes that I think back to is Jason, our conversations over the years about the work that you and the Attribytes team kind of pioneered around product content and getting the food service industry ready to do e-commerce in a high quality way, and talking about how so much of that work, so much of that infrastructure is paying even more dividends today with the emergence of e-commerce in the independent segment, the emergence of e-commerce. And so folks are getting so much more mileage out of those investments that they made in product content. And so a lot of magic happens when different technologies kind of independently reach this stage of readiness. And I think what's really interesting right now in AI, and it's amazing how quickly it's happening, is because AI has been around for a very long time, right? You know, it was a big part of how we did a lot of things at Uber. It was a big part of how we've done a lot of things, both externally, customer facing, but also internally at Pepper. But the technology has just advanced so quickly over the last year and a half, and there are use cases that are possible today that were seemingly out of reach. We might have thought 5-10 years out of reach even 3 or 4 years ago, but again, it's evolved so quickly. And so one of the things that it has been fascinating to observe from my seat, and also to dabble in because we're doing a lot of work here in the world of AI as well, is what the combination of AI and e-commerce and investments our partners have made in product content, what the combination of these technologies is going to be able to do for the customer experience, the DSR experience in food service. And I think there's a lot of exciting possibilities.
Yeah, so we're seeing things now, right? Like using natural language to place an order, You know, the idea of sending a text message into a box and having that box acknowledge that it got it, understand that when I say I need a case of chicken thighs or I need 2 cases of tomatoes, that it understands what tomatoes I want, or at least will continue to clarify so that you get it. Other things like giving those tools to sales reps so that they can start to query their business. Back in my day, I'm going to sound like some old man at the ripe old age of 38, but you know, when I was doing it, if I wanted to get intel on my business, that means I had to stop what I was doing. At the time, it was things like SharePoint spreadsheets and workflows, you know, just to understand where my cases were. And I was usually a week behind, you know. Now we can do things like ask our phone, who are the customers that didn't place their orders yet today, or what's the average case on, you know, mayonnaise this week or something. I think
No,
those are really compelling ways to use it in today's world, don't you think?
do you remember I got my first iPhone probably in like 2009, 2010, a couple of years after it came out, and shortly after, Siri was the big release, and you strike me as an iPhone guy, and you remember how um, useless is putting it probably a little bit too strongly, but it wasn't all that useful at the time. The ability for computers and software to interpret natural language was really, really limited, right? It would only be good for very, very specific queries, like open the Maps app, open Spotify.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the things that the new generation of large language models compared with the computing power that's available today that wasn't available a number of years ago is just the ability for these models to interpret natural language and then structure the content that's been communicated in ways that's useful for creating output via software. It is just unbelievable. And so yeah, I think transcribing orders from whether it's from a text message or an email or from a voicemail recording is table stakes is a strong word, and I don't want to but I think that's a part of the business where we're going to see a lot of innovation this year, and I think there's going to be a lot of exciting experimentation for how technologies that do this will fit into the day-to-day operations of our customers in the food distribution industry.
Yeah, well, let's touch on this slide real quick. So part of the comparison we were making was that adoption of smartphones, and I was a little lazy to get into it because I didn't really understand the power behind it, and it was expensive, right? And it was demanding access to a network that was still kind of growing. But you brought this up to me, and I just kind of visualized it. The decrease in cost and the access to services and the expansion of broadband internet, 4G, 5G, right, really took us from a lackluster adoption rate of smartphones looking at 2010-ish going into the next 7 or 8 years. Now it's arguably in ubiquity, right? Which of us do not? I think my grandmother still has a flip phone and she fights it, but we kind of want to know where she is because she insists on driving. But I think we decided that we're kind of at that same inflection point, right? Everybody's starting to adopt these tools now in food service. So how do we think about AI, what it was yesterday and what it can be right now and what it might be in a couple of years? I think about being introduced to machine learning going back to like 2010. And there's been some industry leaders that we all know and love, like my good friend Eric Kroner, previously a Reinhardt and PFG. He was using Watson to get deep learning and understanding of customer data so that he could create personalized product recommendations, personalized shopping experiences. You mentioned Uber leveraging AI, and I kind of want to understand what that's like. So AI has been around in this kind of limited capacity, but AI has subsections to it, right? So what was machine learning like in your world when Uber was just getting off of the ground with Uber Eats?
Right. And by the way, I think that's the right way to analyze the impact of technology on a specific industry, where we're obviously in a hype cycle around AI right now, and you can hardly talk about any business in any industry without hearing some buzz around how everything's going to be transformed very, very quickly with the latest generative AI technologies. What does that even mean? But the reality is, by the way, I think there's going to be a big impact, but I think it's going to be on very specific tasks and jobs. And so when you talk about machine learning, that was a huge part of the work that we did at Uber, and we talk with our clients about this all the time. You think about the future of how pricing will be done, not just in ride sharing and in food delivery and in food distribution, but really any industry. At Uber, our products were priced not by finance teams, but by our data science teams. And they weren't pricing, transaction by transaction. They were building models to price neighborhoods and to price countries and creating objectives for those models, because what machine learning has been very, very good at for several years now is taking a lot of data points and making high quality predictions that would take a team of human beings. You could do it, but it would take a lot longer, and you just couldn't keep up with the pace at which decision making was required in the real world. And so you lean on machine learning models to do pricing, and I think machine learning is really, really good at that. And machine learning is playing a bigger role in pricing in all of the industries. And recent advances in AI are just going to accelerate that. But what's really special about, again, this latest generation of large language models is the ability for AI to not just plug into like decision making and prediction and optimization use cases, which I'm using broad language, but these are the sorts of tasks that AI was really good at, machine learning was really good at these last several years. Now there's this whole, Gen AI is all about content creation, right? How do I take a voicemail and generate an order? Or how do I take a menu or a photo of a menu and generate an order guide? And these are food distribution specific examples, but if I'm a DSR and I want to introduce myself to a new Mexican restaurant that's just opened up in my city, how do I craft that perfect introductory email? And that the latest generation of AI is really good at content creation, which is a new frontier for AI, and really cool to see what's happening right now.
Well, the audience at home is witnessing my actual AI prompting skills at work, and you can see it's pretty limited, but as I built out this presentation, I wanted a visual representation of what it's like for humans to interact with AI. So I prompted it specifically for this, and this is what it churned out using ChatGPT and DALL-E, and I thought it was really neat. So as we were getting ready for this presentation and trying to bring some different points of view on AI to the conversation, I interviewed your co-founder, Che, and he introduced me to this concept of depth versus breadth. So you just described a lot around machine learning, very precise decision making demanded very precise answer or questions. Excuse me, but now it just feels like AI is better at reaching into a wider array of knowledge bases around the globe, and then getting better at guessing your intent. So when we think about applying this in food service, it's that text to ordering for chicken, and looking at the vast array of things you've done as a user to say, oh, okay, I understand you wanted this chicken. In fact, it's a chicken tender that you order every week, but that's okay, we won't quabble. I'm gonna go ahead and put that on the order guide, right? So it's better at guessing what you mean, and it's better at delivering answers. And I think to the previous couple of slides when we were talking about the barrier of entry lowering, because the price of these things has come down, it's going to make it easier for us to implement these things more broadly in the food service world, where maybe it felt like using AI was limited to the very sophisticated or maybe even the very well funded. But the cost of computing has come down a lot too, don't you think?
It's unbelievable. I think the idea of greater breadth is such a good way to think about it. You know, I'm looking for. I think we're for some jobs. I don't know about every job, but maybe our jobs before long, Jason, we're going to be able to ask an AI copilot tool, what should I do today? You know, I wake up in the morning, how should I spend my day to maximize value for Pepper and our customers? And that's it would have been unthinkable 2 years ago to think I'm going to have a software tool that that gives me that sort of guidance in my day-to-day life, and it might actually be pretty good guidance. And I have a feeling we might not be that far off. And we're going to see progress against objectives like that. We're going to see progress at the individual task level, and before long at the individual job level. And so I do wonder, you know, what are the jobs inside of Pepper? What are the jobs inside of, you know, one of our customers, a food distributor, where a model is going to be able to ingest data, proprietary data, like who are our customers and what's their ordering behavior and what's the recent history of interactions, what are the new businesses that have opened up in my neighborhood, and therefore what's the market like for in produce and in proteins, and therefore how should I spend my day to maximize value for my business. And
well, and one of the things as you're saying that, sorry to interrupt, but I also wanted to make sure, because you've said this to me, it's Iron Man, not Terminator, right? There's a point of view where it's putting a target on DSRs, or it might be putting a target on individuals within a business and say, hey, we don't need you anymore. I think it's almost the opposite of that. I think it's, hey, we don't need you to be doing things that you're not good at, which I don't think humans are great at computation, except for maybe a select few. Because to your point earlier, you can't stack enough humans in a room and go through all of the piles of rebate data and contracts and pricing agreements and all of this stuff that I know at US Foods, once upon a time, they had 60 people, you know, that would do that. Humans are really good at being creative. So that's why I think you and I aren't in trouble, because we're very creative individuals, right? We can dream big. These AI tools are, I think, making us better, faster humans. And I like that you set that tone with me early on. And I hope people aren't out in the world broadly thinking, oh, well, this is going to replace me as a DSR, or this is going to replace me as an analyst. No, I think it's going to make you a better DSR. It's going to make you a better analyst. My 2 cents.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. I mean, how many different AI tools are you using in a given month to get things done, you know, in your role, head of marketing at Pepper?
Well, check out our newsletter, folks. Casey's Corner just delivered yesterday, 6 ways that AI plays in food service right now. Yeah, I mean, that was a combination of ChatGPT. I had a professional copywriter. I interviewed you and Aaron and Che and all that, and it helped me generate content faster. It helped me generate that image that we had on the last screen. It helped me generate the image that's on the next screen. Again, I don't think it's doing anything but making me better at my job in a marketing role. And I think for a DSR, it's going to make them better. And to answer your question pointedly, 2 to 3 AI tools I'm using, like in HubSpot when we do socials posts, for example, it's got generative AI features, you know, ChatGPT and Dolly, you know, those are things that are fairly easy to get access to and definitely help me get things going throughout my day.
Yeah, and I'll use marketing as an example, but I think the same theme is going to hold true in a lot of different AI applications. But I think it's going to raise the bar for what it takes to differentiate. You know, the AI tooling has been really helpful for us working together to express a point of view that we have on the industry and on where software can be helpful to our, you know, our customers and our partners. But you know, our viewpoint is, in our conversations, it's always felt like it's on us to develop a point of view. And while generative AI might give you a starting point, the starting point tends to be relatively bland, which makes sense because it's basically giving you an average of of all,
Right.
all the content that's already out there. It's not as much as it is generative, and that's exciting, and it feels like, you know, it's being really creative. It does, the outputs today feel relatively bland. I see a ton of content out there that is like quite obviously produced by generative AI, and it's clear that a thoughtful human being, you know, a human expert, hasn't necessarily taken the time and energy to take it further and to produce an insight that's really going to add value to a business or a customer. And so that's just an observation I've noticed in our business. And you know, when we think about what's the role of a DSR or a marketer in a food distribution company, you know, I think we're entering the most exciting period ever for DSRs and marketers in this industry, because a lot of the paint by numbers, the cookie cutter work that is important work, but was that you could basically follow a playbook and get it pretty much right. The AI is going to be really, really good at executing those more procedural things. And what's going to differentiate the best marketers and the best DSRs are those that will be able to, you know, assimilate all the information around them, use the tools, but use them in a more creative and thoughtful way than their competitors. And to me, that's you know, I think that's part of what we really love about our jobs. And I think a lot of folks that really love their work is a big part of what they love about their jobs, the ability for, you know, creative expression. And I think we're going to see more of that in food distribution, in marketing, and in sales in particular, with you know, the advent and the deployment of these sorts of tools.
So, excuse me, let's double click into product data and analytics a little bit, because AI is helping us get really good at surveying the landscape of product information that's out there. And I've been, you know, touting the GS1 standards for many years. I've been helping organizations get some religion on data governance, you know, all relatively uninteresting things on the surface, but really important to the business. And now AI has made it a little bit more interesting for me, because we can use those same generative AI features and the deep learning to start to infer attribution with some level of confidence, and we can use human validation. It's made us integrate systems faster. It's helped us get after better analytics, because we can ask sillier questions and get better results, and really help people get into what I've been saying is the other AI, which is actionable insights. So unpack the product data cleanup for me, and integration stuff, and maybe just a couple beats on how analytics is turning into actionable insights with all the tools available to us.
Yeah, well, so two things jump to mind, and I mean, one is so you know better than anybody. One of the biggest hurdles in the world of product data is just data hygiene. You know, data hygiene, because we've all got an ERP that we've been using for many years, and we've all been accumulating product data over those years. We've had changeovers in staff, changeovers in norms, and so that data is stored in different ways, and hasn't always been worth the time and energy to standardize it in a given month or in a given year. And so a lot of us have a lot of debt when it comes to data hygiene in our ERP, and it's still, you know, somewhat of a manual effort to go through a catalog of 50,000 items and map items to GTINs, remove duplicates. But this is one category of work where, you know, from what we've seen in our work at Pepper, is the right tools that are developed using the latest AI technologies can dramatically accelerate the pace and dramatically reduce the cost of that cleanup work. And it is one of the investments that we've been making that we're really excited about the potential. And so that's with regards to data hygiene. The other area where it's been pretty unbelievable, the leap forward in with the latest large language models is their ability to navigate like data queries. And so you and I have spent in our careers a lot of time in spreadsheets, and a lot of time in pivot tables, and a lot of time mining large bodies of data for very specific insights. And it always, starts with being able to ask the right question, but there was always this skill set around, all right, well, if I'm asking the right question, now how do I actually explore and mine the data to produce the output that I need to see in order to get the answer to my question? And what the latest models are just amazingly good at is taking all those mechanics off the table, mining the data, cutting the data, and not even just creating the tables and the charts, but providing an interpretation that is generally high quality almost all of the time. And to me, that's just a massive leap forward in the world of business intelligence software. And so, I think what we're going to see a lot of in a lot of platforms is an evolution away from pivot tables and away from charts and towards natural language as the interface of choice when it comes to accessing business intelligence. And by the way, I think we live in a world through distribution where the average distributor stores a ton of data in their ERP system.
All of the data. They have more data than anyone.
Yeah. And it's organized in a way such that it's really lends itself to the way a large language model likes to work with data. And so it's just, I think, unbelievable what you can do when you take that technology and train it on a distribution data set and maybe do a little bit of fine tuning around the edges, but to create a tool that provides a level of access to business intelligence that unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen anything like it.
Actionable insights, the other AI. All right, we're at the 30-minute mark-ish, so I want to make sure we leave some time for questions at the end. Oops. I know that folks at home should be able to surface some questions in a chat box somewhere. This particular GoToWebinar is a little new to me, so whatever you got in front of you, send us some questions, man. I definitely want to make sure that we can tackle those. Pivoting a little bit, but in the spirit of analytics and tools that are available now, we were talking a lot about bringing digital experiences to life in food service and this notion of advertising. And, with a lot of folks who have had sophistication around e-commerce, it's been fairly normal for a brand to engage with that distributor and build out part of their program. And, maybe on branded products specifically, like exclusive branded products, they're going to help surface product recommendations based on probably a very traditional pay-to-play model. And just now are we seeing some of those analytics and some of those abilities to give brands the gears to turn in the food service world that's broadly been available in the consumer space with CPGs and big retailers. So it's almost a similar curve we saw with smartphone adoption, where the introduction of advertising opportunities in these huge social networks within social media, specifically, Instagram opens this up somewhere around 2010, and now you've got these massive amounts of opportunities to build personalized and targeted audiences to deliver something that's going to be relevant to them, right? So return on ad sales is now a big part of it. And you brought up Instacart and Carrot ads as kind of the comparison. Can you share a little bit more how you're feeling about that and how it parlays in food service today?
Yeah. I mean, I think it ties to this theme of, when different related technologies reach a certain point of readiness, that's when the magic happens, the combination of these technologies. And Instacart's Carrot Ads product is a pretty recent example, but we could go back even further. I think we could go all the way back to the early days of Google and the early days of Facebook, who, obviously those businesses are built on top of advertising, but not what was the traditional advertising at the time, advertising that's context specific, and often, specifically in the case of Google search, captures potential customers at the moment of intent. Meaning if I'm searching for HVAC services for my home in California, and I'm searching for that on Google, then I see ads specific to that query, and those ads are so much higher converting than traditional out-of-home ads, in a newspaper or on a billboard, legacy channels, because it's capturing folks at the moment of intent, and they can actually follow through and make an action. So that's not a new concept. It's so mundane in our day-to-day life. We don't even think about it anymore. Facebook ads work in the same way. Instacart ads work in the same. Instagram ads work in the same way. What I don't think should have been surprising to anybody, but it was amazing to see the results. The velocity at which this became a very serious business for Instacart is they started running ads for grocery products, and they ran them in the Instacart app. I don't know how well known this is, but Instacart also powers e-commerce for a very large number of the national and regional grocery stores in the United States. Chains like Publix and Albertsons, and a lot of the regional chains that we're super familiar with, and also helping food manufacturers run ads on those e-commerce platforms. And they've been it's been very productive advertising spend, which shouldn't be a surprise because it's reaching purchasers in a moment of intent and in a context where they can take an action. If not today, the next time they log in, or the time after that they log in. And so that is a pattern in digital advertising that's been well established. It's a big part of the reason why over the last 20 years, spend has shifted from more traditional marketing channels to be largely digital advertising over the years when you look at advertising globally as a whole. And I think we're going to see a similar trend in food service as well, as more and more business is done online.
Yeah, well, I had put up here the term hot sheet that might resonate with some people more than others, but I was sharing with you too, back in my day, I'm really starting to sound like an old man. I would look and shop, what was kind of on the promotion cycle, and I would have to go and plug it into my own little template. I had all the tools, I had imagery up on a SharePoint site, and the idea was, hey man, we're going to give you the tools as the DSR to put together your own hot sheets. And I had a LaserJet printer on my desk, and I would fill in this template with things that I thought were going to be, best suited to my territory to go and talk to my customers about. And I am so glad to see that, these are largely going away, because I would spend all that time doing it, and I would walk in and I'd hand it to somebody and they'd look at it and then they'd throw it in the trash. So now, to your point earlier, it's like at the time of purchase, I'm not walking in there taking the order anymore. I'm walking in there and trying to be consultative. But now we can also leverage the brands and the manufacturers and the brokers to do this digitally at that time of purchase to help make me as a DSR more money. And when those users say, oh, this is new to me, I'd love to have a sample. We're seeing some cool analytics, some cool return on investment here where, number one, that reorder rate on those new items, I've heard numbers from 27% to 46%. So the stickiness of those new items tends to be pretty real. But then also hearing things like 5, 6, 7, 8 times return on that ad spend when they're promoting those stocked items doesn't even necessarily have to be a revolutionary new item, right? It's just something that you're putting in front of eyeballs and getting somebody to go, oh yeah, I should put that in my cart. Order sizes are getting bigger, right? Basket size in e-commerce, what do we say is 20 to 25% more than somebody just taking a traditional order. I think ads are here to stay, and I think the brands are probably better at doing this than maybe we are. And I'd love to see us give them the tools to be able to do this in a very real way, a la Instacart.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a combination of both. Again, You know, my philosophy is the best way to predict the future is to study the past. And we merchandising has been a core function in retail since the very beginning. You know, one of my favorite books by Sam Walton, you know, Walmart, and he
Of
talks
Walmart fame, I've heard of him.
and the culture around merchandising as being core to providing a great customer experience, but also providing a great service to suppliers, but also just running a great business. And core to merchandising has been creating opportunities for your suppliers to promote their products, and you know, they'll fund those promotions, and that's good for your business and it's good for your customers. But they don't do it independently. You know, they do it with guidance. Walmart was an expert. They were experts at merchandising, and they would help their suppliers think about their product placement campaigns. They would separately think about, you know, non-sponsored product placement as well, in order to optimize the customer experience and in order to move as much product as possible. And all of those same things, all those same strategies also apply in the e-commerce world, and they're good. And the e-commerce world is becoming more and more our day-to-day world in food service. And so I think those skill sets will absolutely apply here as well. And so it's marketing managers, you know, food distributors working in collaboration with their suppliers who will fund and sponsor campaigns, and will have ideas and will have content and together producing a better product for their customers. And so I think we're in the very early days here, but I think that there's, if history, you know, were to teach us anything, you know, it would be that this is going to become an important part of doing marketing in a food service operation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the conversations are shifting away from what we traditionally think about trade spend versus, you know, some other avenues to spend that money. So now, you know, you're seeing other departments within these brands, innovation centers, brand managers and stuff like that going, oh, well, this is what we used to do over here. Can we do this over here now? You know, it's a really interesting opportunity, but food service has always been a closed loop, you know, so there's just no access. And I'm glad to see that we're kind of coming up. I know we always think of ourselves as, you know, kind of the step brother or little brother to retail in some way in food service, but we're such a huge industry that has a ton of great tools that hadn't traditionally been available. And I think also to you know, bring it home, it's just, you know, about understanding what's actually available as an independent distributor, as a national distributor, and what's real, right? Taking some of that maybe glossy veneer away to think like, oh my God, I need to install AI in my business tomorrow, you know, or else I'm behind. It's more, no, let's try and understand what all these things are, and let's try to, you know, bring them in the way that works best for us. So I love that it's a little bit more ubiquitous. So I'm gonna offer that we kind of ratchet down the conversation and let the folks at home ask some questions. But I also think it's notable that, you know, we talked about a few things that maybe we weren't very clear about. We wanted you guys in the conversation, we wanted you guys to understand what large language models and machine learning and natural language processing add up to, and that's the bigger kind of nebulous term AI, right? It's really some siloed principles that are only now starting to come together. Do you agree?
I totally agree. And I think it's super important to recognize that because we're in a hype cycle, right? This is the next generation of something that we've been doing for a long time, and legitimately, there's been a major leap in the last 18 months in the capabilities of AI. And there's going to be a lot of hype in the next little while, and a lot of that is substance, but some of it is just hype. And what inevitably happens after a hype cycle is there's a period of disillusionment, you know, the
I
productivity.
thought it was going to save my life, Bowie. Come
Yeah,
on.
but
What happened?
making leaders will be making steady progress every single month and every single quarter in AI and how it impacts their business. And I think give it a little bit more time, and folks will see it for what it is, as a really important part of running a day-to-day business, and probably no matter what your business is, and certainly that also holds true for food distribution.
I love it. Well, we touched on the other AI, actionable intelligence, actionable insights, a little bit of what we can do now, and touched on what digital experiences could or should look like in the food service world. I think that's kind of all that's fit for print. Any other closing thoughts before we ask Matt to come back and help us with some Q&A?
Not for
We're here
me.
to help. We're here to help,
Yeah.
folks. So Matt, why don't you come on back or help us kind of bring this thing home? Should I keep sharing my screen or should shut that off?
Yeah, that's great. And thanks to both of you for some great content. I certainly learned a great deal today, so really appreciate it. And we do have some questions. And again, if anyone has any other questions, please type them into the questions box on your screen. So we'll just jump right into it here. It's kind of first question, Romy, how many years has Pepper been around for?
We got started in 2019, launched our first product in fall of 2020, and so going on strong, I guess 5 years now.
That's insane. And now I'm at the doorstep of almost 10 years ago. So it was in 2015 that Attribytes started. So it's crazy to see how fast these things grow.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll keep up the great work. Next question here. Does Pepper have any pre-built integrations with ERPs? And how easy or hard is the integration process?
Ooh, the hard-hitting journalism here, Bowie.
Yeah. It's very Pepper specific question, but I'll touch on it quickly. I know, Matt, we're supposed to focus on AI here, but ERP integration has been a massive investment for Pepper over the years, and I think we've done more of this than anybody else. We integrate with well over 30 commercially available ERP systems. We have an implementation team that's based here in North America that is an expert at kind of speccing out a distributor's requirements and then actually executing that implementation, not just quickly, but doing it hand in hand with our customers so that they feel brought along each step of the way. And so we could go super deep on this topic. It's a bit of a tangent, so maybe I'll stop there. But yeah, we do integrations with a ton of different ERP systems, and it's a really big part of what we do.
Great. The next one's sort of in a comment / question, but I know you touched upon kind of the closed loop scenario. I think one of the attendees had mentioned that it's, the adoption of this technology in the industry has always been a challenge. So can you talk a little bit more about that and kind of where you see that going a little bit more on the closed loop?
Closed loop. What do you think?
I think traditionally for me, it's been every distributor is kind of its own ecosystem. So in yesterday's conversation that I was having around updating product information or having access to see what somebody sees online, that was kind of a closed loop because it's not like Amazon, right? I can't just go to US Food or Cisco or AtlanticDistributors.com and go and shop for products. In most cases, place an order and I'm done. At least traditionally that had not been the way, but it feels like that's starting to open up now. But it requires probably the adoption of some technology quickly in order, for you to bring that experience to life. I mean, I remember building out my own web pages in the late 90s. Maybe some of us remember how easy it was, but you had to know like HTML code and you had to be a little bit of a programming nerd. And then all of a sudden these other platforms came around to help you kind of take advantage of that last mile effort that you had to make to get you across the finish line faster. So maybe it's in the spirit. GeoCities, yeah, Angel Fire, yeah, for sure, man. So I've been nerding out on that for a long time. But now if you ask me to go and like stand up a website, it's all plug and play. You know, it's all content managed services and that kind of thing. What I think that's the spirit of the question. I don't know.
That's helpful. Awesome. Thank you. Next one here. Can you take a deeper dive into how to enable digital engagement with suppliers?
I can start. And Jason, pile on, because you've been doing this longer than almost anybody in this space. But I think that the first step is recognizing that there's a lot of excitement. You know, our experience has been there's a lot of excitement from the supplier community to engage in these new channels, digital channels. What does that engagement look like? I think the industry is still figuring it out. You know, we run programs at Pepper to help to facilitate some of these things, but as a general observation is that the distribution community and the manufacturing community is still kind of working through what are the norms when it comes to how they partner for the purpose of merchandising. Here's an example. We partner with food distributors that have seen phenomenal growth in e-commerce adoption in a short amount of time, and so there's eyeballs kind of looking at their e-commerce experience every week. That's valuable real estate for a manufacturer to advertise. But there's also you've got folks that are also searching for different products, on a given day of the week, whether they're searching for chicken wings or they're searching for ice cream. And so these are different and unique opportunities for manufacturers to plug in to a food distributor's e-commerce experience. And so how do you construct a marketing campaign or a calendar across these different submodules within an e-commerce experience? And there's a lot of norms that have been developed in other industries. Instacart's created now a very large business around this, but I think those norms in food service are still being figured out.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, the digital shelf has evolved, so much over the last 10 years. It used to be just, I need a picture on my product, right? That was checking the box. That was good enough. Now we're in a world where, it's not one picture, it's four if you go by GS1 standards. And if you go by consumer standards, it's I want 4, 5, 10 images. I also want reviews and I want 360 views. And do you have a video for that? And how do I use it? It's just been this constant evolution of like creating more content to support the use case. And as a sales rep, I can't know more than, I think my pal DSR Dave, if anybody knows him, would tell you that sales reps can only really remember about 400 items, right, with any level of specificity. So my career leading up to this had been trying to give folks different ways to educate themselves and understand what the product is so that they could make a more informed buying decision. But it's so far beyond that now, and we need the help of the brands to be able to facilitate that, and they need a vehicle to be able to, instigate updates on products, to tweak things, especially for the big brands where, they've got whole marketing departments dedicated to this stuff on the consumer side of the world. And then, you log into a system and try and buy that same item in food service, and the marketing message is something to the effect of tastes great, or cook in convection oven for 350 degrees for 10 minutes or whatever. We need to get the proximity of the brand and the operator, the guys making the purchases digitally, a little bit closer. I don't know if I answered the question, honestly.
Remembering details for 400 items even sounds unbelievable to me.
Well, it's terrifying, but it's almost a little misleading because, for me as a sales rep, I was kind of focused on certain categories, and as a chef culinarian, I gravitated towards center of the plate, and things like produce were a little less interesting for me to sell. But then I also got tuned into the fact that something like, this is a good example, non-foods, toilet paper, chemicals, all that stuff that you need in order to deliver food away from home. Those are not inherently interesting things. Those are complicated things. Just think about the cup and lid debacle, right? I bought a cup and I needed lid, but there's a different size lid for this cup, you know? How do I get after that knowledge? So it's a category that people largely are uncomfortable with on purpose. And it's also the most profitable category in our world. So I was always like, why wouldn't I learn about those things and try and understand it? And now we're in a world where I don't necessarily have to be that expert, and the brands can be that merchandiser for me. That brand can be the educator, and that brand can syndicate that message directly to the person that's going to buy it. And if we all do it correctly together, I'm going to end up making more money as a sales rep. I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's great. Thank you both. I think we have time for a couple more questions here. So next one is, how does AI help with product information cleanup, such as gathering GTINs, imagery, and nutritionals? And then second part of that, how does your team approach this?
The answer to this question gets pretty technical pretty quickly, but let me, you still need
I'll
to
recap at the end. How's that?
The generative AI is not going to generate the right GTIN for you. So it starts with access to the right content libraries. But the step that generative AI is really, really good at is matching. You know, as a general, one of the things that machine learning was not as good at generative AI at is, in order to get a good output from machine learning model, you have to be pretty precise with the inputs. And when you think about precise with the inputs, I'm taking a messy catalog with a lot of hygiene issues and trying to match it to a clean list of GTINs. It's almost like the definition of messy inputs. And what the new large learning models are really, really good at, when they're properly trained and you're doing the right work around those models to help them get better every day, is taking messy inputs and doing a pretty good matching job, which, if you think about it, is exactly what you or I or any of us would do if we were assigned the job of taking a catalog that's not mapped to GTINs and mapping it to a set of GTINs. We're just going line by line and looking at the attributes and trying to figure out what's the best match. And that kind of matching, the large language models, it sure is looking like they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, I think also it gives us the ability to start making inferences and recommendations on attribution, not by necessarily coming up with it on its own, but, you know, however many distributors we have, we've got hundreds of thousands of line items, you know, that these guys stock, and some guys better at having a GTIN on their product than another. But if I can understand the other elements of it, the brand name, the pack size, the product description, and all of that, I can start inferring based on my data set kind of what that GTIN is, and we help make our distributors better. We just ran an exercise with some distributors, and we saw like 150% improvement on how many GTINs they could put in their system, because we were able to help make some better recommendations back to them based on what we knew about it. So it's more about triangulating and inferring and making recommendations. But again, in the spirit of Iron Man, we still need that human element at the core to help validate and reconcile that. So, you know, if people are hearing or thinking that, well, AI is just going to help me get 100% of the data I need on 100% of my items, the answer is maybe, but who's validating that? Because we know that generative AI is still in its adolescence. You were describing before, you know, it's very good, Bowie, at assembling information and then giving you somewhat of a essay-like answer, just like a college student, right? But I wouldn't necessarily trust that college student's essay as verbatim until a professional looked at it or it becomes a professional case study or something. So I think when it comes to product data and how it helps with cleanup, it's the same point we made earlier. It makes us faster as humans to do the things that we're just generally not good at, which is general computation and tasking in that way. And we focus on the quality of that data, making sure that we're putting the right items on the right products at the right times and the right images, and not necessarily like just a image so that something pops.
Awesome, thank you. So I think maybe you've got 30 seconds to a minute to answer this one, and maybe folks can follow up with you to get more information. But
Let's do it.
Kind of last question here is, how is your team thinking about FSMA 204 that there's been a lot of discussion about in our industry, and supporting operators as well as distributors around FSMA 204?
Yeah.
Bowie.
I mean, there's a lot that we're doing in collaboration with a number of organizations, if they're included, that are really driving the thought leadership around this issue. For us, we're pretty focused on what's the end user experience going to be, and how do we make sure that food distributors and sales reps and operators are able to be fingertippy with the data that they're going to need to be able to access in an event. I don't think the standards for what the expectation is going to be, and exact operationally what happens in those moments, when there's an event, those standards aren't exactly written yet. And so it's been exciting for us to participate in the conversations and being a part of figuring that out. And something that we're committed to is being one of the technology platforms that's ready to serve, that's operationally ready to help operators and food distributors live up to those specific requirements that they're going to be held to when the time comes.
Yeah.
And our work in the meantime is to work hand in hand with the industry as the details of those requirements get figured out.
Yeah, and I'll just say, manufacturers and distributors still have a capture problem. Getting the data off of the box that they need, right? A GS1 128, which is a little bit more expensive to put on the box, having a place to store it, having the ability to reference that. I think in our world today and over the last probably 20 years, as long as I could go one back and one forward, we're good. And then it was, again, a bench of humans that would pick up the phone and make a phone call, like the Great Spinach Catastrophe of 2009 or the Pink Slime event of 2012. Those were all human-led things. And I think we're in a position now to where we can start doing push notifications. We can do all that stuff. And we're ready for all of it, I think. And we want to help solve, what that capturing problem is, but we're not in the hardware business. So I don't know if we can do it.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that. And before we kind of close up here, is there a way for folks to kind of follow up with you to get more information on anything you talked about today?
Yeah, man, happy to wax poetic on all these things. So it's very simply Jason at usepepper.com, Bowie, Bowie at usepepper.com. Happy to make some time and try and help educate, or even just give, I always just call it therapy, a little data therapy if you need it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to both of you, Bowie and Jason, and to Pepper for presenting such great content today. Really enjoyed the conversation and learning a lot more around AI. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next webinar. So thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
We did it. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.